USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11 and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. Well, it's in the rearview mirror now, but still a lot of excitement over the U.S. gold in the World Juniors in Sweden. And who better to talk to about the World Juniors?
And joining us now in USCHO Spotlight, he was over in Sweden for the World Junior Championship, one of the best international hockey writers in the United States. That's Chris Peters from FloSports.com. Chris, what a great tournament. I can't imagine what it was like to be there in person. But before we get into the whole USA performance, just tell us about what it was like going over there for what looked like a great couple of venues and a great tournament.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to be in Sweden. This is my 6th World Juniors covered live. 2 of them have been in Europe. And so this one was cool to be at in Sweden. And certainly, obviously being one of the few American journalists that were actually over there, you get some pretty good access to Team USA and get a chance to talk to a lot of the players and the coaches and, just see them kind of every day. And so that was great too, from, just from a coverage standpoint and being able to cover the tournament. But, Sweden's an amazing country. Gothenburg's a beautiful city, just a lot of great things there. Very easy to get around, very, entertaining, plenty of good nightlife, restaurants, different things like that. And then, on top of it, you have just a completely hockey mad city. I mean, they really are. They love their hockey there. Gothenburg is where Frölunda is based. And Frölunda is, probably one of the most important European clubs in all of hockey history, in terms of the number of pro players that they've produced over the years. But, just being there, among the Swedish fans, among the many NHL scouts and among the media that traveled. I mean, it was just a tremendous place to watch a hockey game. And, to be there for 2 weeks, it's a long tournament. It's a bit of a grind, but you really got to pinch yourself a lot while you're there. Just like, I can't believe I'm here.
I don't want to get into the individuals on this Team USA because there were so many that were fantastic, but just as a team, you watched that team from day one, which was a tough game, I thought, against Norway, to improving throughout the round robin. Then they get into the medal round and ran into a very good Finnish team in the semifinals, and then found a way to beat them, rolled against Sweden in the finals. Did this team seem to improve every day they were together?
I think absolutely they did. The tournament, as the tournament progressed, it was they didn't start great. Like one of their toughest games of the whole tournament was against Norway. They ended up winning that game 4-1. I don't think anybody scored fewer than 6 goals against Norway the rest of the tournament. And this is a U.S. team that ended up scoring more goals than anybody in this World Junior Championship. And they had that tough start. There was still a little bit of the cobwebs being shaken out. I feel like against Switzerland as well. But they ended up scoring 11 goals in that game. But really, it was kind of a third period that went crazy. And you just saw it against Czechia. They struggled in that game. They had a few guys out sick. And they needed to get some help. Basically, they had to win the shootout. Jacob Fowler, who didn't end up being the goalie to start the medal round, got them stopped 6 to 7 shooters in the shootout, and they win that game, and which really set the table for the rest of the tournament for that team, because they ended up having the number 1 overall seed in the playoff round. And so, they play Latvia, then you play, Finland, but you have the last change. You play Sweden, who's in Sweden, but you have the last change in that game as well, which David Carl used a ton. So yes, vastly improved. And then their best game, their best period was the third period against Sweden. Their best night, they showed out in that game. And, I thought throughout the entire tournament on paper, the U.S. was the best team. And then in the end, they got better and better. And then, one of the players that really got better and better as the tournament went on was Rucker McGorty, who came into the tournament after an injury at Michigan, was hospitalized for more than a week and managed to get himself healthy, come back to the tournament and lead this team to a gold medal as the team captain, who had 9 points, 9 points in the tournament for Rucker McGorty as well. So, you continually saw that over and over again where certain guys were stepping up. And then, some of those guys did save their best for last.
We talked on Monday, Ed, Derek Schooley, and myself on Weekend Review about David Carl and the fact that he's 34 years old. He has now won as a head coach, an NCAA championship. He has won in his first go round with USA Hockey. He has now won a gold medal. How high does his stock rise? And is there a lot more maybe in the future with him for USA Hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, his stock was already very high to begin with. And you add to your championships, the more you win, the more your stock grows. And that's not a surprise. I did ask him after the tournament, are you going to come back next year for 2025? We saw Nate Lehman do it. We saw Bob Motzko do it after victories. David didn't say yes or no definitively, but certainly didn't rule it out. Wanted to celebrate that first medal. And I would be shocked if he's not the coach next year. I think that one of the things that is really remarkable about what David Carl has done, both at Denver and where he is now, is that he sets a standard pretty quickly. I think everybody knew exactly where they stood with him. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do. They knew what he expected of them, and they wanted to deliver. He's a very stoic individual. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have talked to him and have been around him, and he doesn't give much away. It doesn't show much emotion, doesn't show a lot. Even on the bench, you don't see him kind of fly off the handle at the referees or anything. When he's upset about something, he certainly lets them know. But he has such this reserved way about him that I just think makes him, one, approachable, and two, for the players, relatable. He doesn't seem to get too high or too low. I think about the way that they structured their team, how well he knew these players, and how well he knew what positions to put them in, what buttons to push. You think about Quinn Finley is a guy at Wisconsin. And when he made this roster, I was like, I'm not sure about that one. That one sticks out a little bit to me. Like, it's not, is he one of these guys? He was one of their best penalty killers, played in a fourth line role, was given a ton of responsibility, and they knew exactly what they wanted to get out of him. And he delivered on that. And so, that's so important in this tournament, knowing your roster. I think that's one of the reasons that Canada lost so early, was that I don't feel like they had the familiarity with their players that USA did with theirs. And part of that's not having a summer camp like USA does every year. Canada usually does, didn't do it this year. I think they probably will next year. But to see like David Carl, there were no surprises for him. There was no major adjustments that they had to make. And they didn't have a big blue line. They had, a lot of star players. They had a lot of egos. They had a lot of personalities on that team. And they managed it in a way that maximized what that was. So to me, I think that every time the U.S. has won at this tournament, we've seen coaches make key decisions over the course of that tournament. And I think that there wasn't really necessarily any one area where David Carl had to make it a huge adjustment, because I think they were so well prepared for what their team could do, and they simply delivered on it.
You mentioned Dave Carl in quite some detail there. How about the staff he pulled together? All college guys, all experienced coaches. Were you able to observe how he worked as a coaching staff with his assistants?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously they had Garrett Raboin came in as a late addition to the staff. He was not on the bench, but he was very much involved in a lot of the planning and decision making there. Brett Larson was, I believe, he was running the power play, and Steve, he was running the power play, and Steve Miller was running the PK. I think Steve Miller has been at this thing so many times, and he's got so many gold medals now that, I think that any coach is going to kind of let him do his thing. Team USA's PK was fantastic in this tournament for a lot of it. And it was because they had great personnel. They had great speed. They had Gavin Brindley and Oliver Moore. And so they knew which guys they wanted to put out there. I think that also David Lassonde being involved in the goalie decisions. This was probably one of the most critical decisions that they had to make, was who would be the number one goalie for this team. And they would never, ever, ever say it's Trey Augustine or it's Jacob Fowler. They never let it get to that point. But I'm pretty sure they knew all along how they were going to structure the way the goalies played. And I always think that Trey Augustine was going to get the gold medal game. No one ever told me that. That's just my sense of what I saw. And so, you let the coaches do what they do best. And USA had a good power play. They had a good penalty kill. They had, they had good adjustments. When Jimmy Snuggerud was out of the lineup, instead of putting him right back on the top line, they let Oliver Moore stay there because it worked well. And then they still got Jimmy Snuggerud all his minutes, even though he was technically on the fourth line. He still played 18 minutes a game. And they found ways to work him in and maximize his talents. So, that was the thing that really struck me, was that, this team was, one, well constructed, and two, they just executed at such an incredibly high level. And then had their best when they needed it. And, I think they had great practices. They had really good, just watching them work together. They also had 3 players that basically weren't active. So you have 3 players that are never playing, but they kept those guys engaged as well. Aaron Manishin and Kerry Torrance and Sam Hillebrand. That's a tough position to be in the guys that never dress. But they kept those guys were just as excited as anybody that the gold medal was won, because I think they felt like they were a part of it the whole way, and they were. So yeah, really impressed by that. And the structure, obviously a very experienced staff and a lot of guys that do a lot of things well.
One of the things that was apparent watching on TV, and something people commented on, was kind of the swagger and bravado of this U.S. team, probably punctuated with an exclamation point by Lane Hudson taking on Anton Johansson. Was there kind of a cockiness and swagger about this team that you saw?
There was. I mean, and there actually has been with this age group for a long time. I think that Rutger McGroarty's kind of the Pied Piper. He's one of my favorite players to talk to, because he just tells you what he's thinking, and he's obviously gregarious, and he kind of pulls everybody along with him. But, I think it's really important to understand the history of this rivalry with Sweden that has built up over the last couple of years. And really, that's where I think it wasn't so much swagger as it was, we want to punish you, basically. And that was, I think it kind of, maybe it went a little too far at times. There was a lot of things that I think uncharacters, like, I'll be honest with you, I was a little surprised to see Ryan Leonard blow a kiss to the crowd. It doesn't seem like that's kind of his personality, but that just kind of took over. I mean, the visual is stunning, though. It was pretty good. I got to give it to him, but I think that there was such a confidence, because there's such a familiarity with these guys, and there was the 2004 birth year, which is guys like McGroarty, Hudson, Gauthier, Snuggerud, Isaac Howard, Frank Nazar, Ryan Chesley. Like, these guys had been in many international tournaments at the biggest stages, and that includes the Youth Olympics as U16 players. A lot of those guys were on that team. They lost in the gold medal game there. They lost in the gold medal game their U18 year. The guys that played as underagers the year before lost in the quarterfinals. They lost in the semifinals at last year's World Juniors. So they had never experienced that. And so I think that they wanted to do it for each other. And let's not forget, one of the swaggiest of them all is Logan Cooley, and he wasn't there. So like but that was just, they had built up that friendship, that camaraderie, that closeness, that they refused to lose this tournament. Like, anybody that asked me about what my prediction was, I was like, I think USA is going to win. And I don't think it's because they are the most skilled team. I think it's just because they are desperate. They played, and I feel like they played that way against Finland when they were trailing 2-0, and then even against Sweden throughout that entire game. And then it all bubbled over at the end with the celebrations and the fighting and the different things that went on. And that they had felt that they had been wronged. The Swedish players had taunted them during the Under-18 World Championship, and they had very long memories about that. And so they wanted to give it right back to him and maybe give it back to him a little bit more. But to me, I think this team is going to be defined by that 2004 birth year and those guys that, basically had their one last chance as an age group. I'm sure some of those guys are going to play on U.S. national teams in the future, but it's never the same. It's never going to be this collection of guys. I think there was, something around 11 players that had been through those hardships. And, in the end, they come out on top, even without the best player in the age group in Logan Cooley.
More with FloSports' Chris Peters in a moment. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back now with Chris Peters. It's been pretty obvious what a difference it has made in the World Juniors to have the U.S. National Team Development Program. But what about the impact of that team in general on the college game, on those guys going on to the pros, and even their influence on youth hockey?
Yeah, I think specific to the NTDP, I think, one of the things about it is it did set a bar. I feel like it set a bar, and I feel like this team is emblematic of that with a number of players that played there. But basically said, you look at the early stages. You think about back when Jeff Jackson had started the program, and how dire the international picture was for the U.S. beneath no gold medals at the Men's World Championship since 1930. Still hasn't happened at that tournament. But no World Junior gold medals, no one even close. No one even knew what it was for a long time. And I think it's to his credit that there was a vision that we have to care about these tournaments because these are stepping stones to the Olympics. These are stepping stones to the NHL. These are stepping stones where we can measure ourselves against other countries. And so by forming the NTDP and then executing it the way that it has been executed, and you can argue, there's still people that'll argue, that it shouldn't exist and that these players should be spread out. But it made a uniform standard for what excellence is supposed to look like. And they've experienced that at the under 18 level. They've experienced that in a number of levels. And then I think what it has done, it has made the USHL better because those teams are now wanting to compete and saying, hey, we should have some of these players and some players should pick us over that route. And you look at the way that, the Chicago Steel had done that and the Youngstown Phantoms have started to do that. And, the Tri-City Storm, where they get the players that maybe didn't, end up going to the NTDP. So that has raised the level. Everybody's raising their game because they saw if you invest in development over wins and losses, the wins and losses will take care of themselves. And then on top of that, you've got now it keeps those players in the system longer because they're certainly going to stay until they're 18 years old, almost always. I mean, some players do leave early, but most players stay until they're 18 years old. It leaves the college door open for those players for longer. And then they make a decision to whatever they're going to do next with college. And so we've seen bigger star players enter college hockey. And you say, okay, well, we've got our Jack Eichels and now, we're going to have other players like him where they choose college hockey and guys like Clayton Keller and Logan Cooley and now Cutter Gauthier and, all those players, they're choosing the college route because there's now a proven path. And that path is, kind of like, okay, I play in my elite AAA and then I go to the NTDP and then I go to college and then I go to the NHL and I don't go to the AHL. I just go to the NHL, so there's all those different things, but I really do feel like, you have to give so much credit to the people that built the program in the early stages because it was a very unpopular decision among like I remember that there was a story that my good friend Ryan Clark wrote on ESPN recently, where Jordan Leopold was getting it from everybody for just choosing to go there and leaving Minnesota and leaving his high school team to go to that program. But he had experienced, I got to play against the Sedins as an 18-year-old, and that changed the trajectory of my career. Like that's the thing where you say, that those opportunities were more prevalent in that program. And now I think they've gotten it down a little bit more to a science, where, they do have, high-end strength and conditioning, nutrition, the schooling is taken care of. All these different things are taken care of there that, these players can be hockey players, but also still grow as people. And that's, in the end, I think the real influence of it all is that it's raised the bar for what the expectations are. And now we're seeing more and more and more American players, whether they're in the NTDP or not, exceeding that standard.
This is kind of a broad question, Chris, and you're kind of started to address it in your last response. But the biggest question I think American hockey fans still have is 1960, 1980. When is the next 1980? Olympic gold medal is still the one kind of elusive goal. You've seen these 5 World Juniors in 15 years, and those are wonderful. But, and even World Championships don't happen, and I understand the NHL probably has a huge part to play in, the IIHF playing against the NHL schedule has a huge part to play in that. But I guess the Olympics is what everybody wants. Do you feel like that is anywhere closer, or is there still so much of a fight to go of who is going to play in the Olympics, and we might never see the best U.S. team there?
Yeah, there's still a lot in the air for the next Winter Olympics, but I'm telling you right now, if the NHL, the IIHF, and the IOC don't find a way to allow this era, we're gonna start moving past the best years of Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, those guys, because basically what you see is most guys, their best years are going to be in that 23 to 26 range. And we're already past that for some of those guys, which, they're still amazing players. They're still great, but we have been denied this opportunity to see those particular players in this. So if the NHL messes that up for what I believe is a new golden age of hockey player, which I believe is going to be the guys that when I'm super old, I'm going to say, I saw those guys, they are going to be iconic players in the history of this game. And if we don't get them on the Olympic stage, it is an incredible failure on the part of everyone of those decision makers. The players want to do it. The national governing bodies want to do it. Everybody seems to want to do it. They can't just figure out how to get there. Now, there is a complicating factor in Italy, which is the next Winter Olympics, in that they do not have a suitable arena for Olympic hockey at this point, and we're getting to crunch time. So I've been told it's been waved off, like nobody seems all that concerned about it, but it's still like if it comes down to that, then just we better find another tournament, because that can't possibly be the reason that we don't get Olympic hockey. But I'm telling you right now, if we do not get McDavid, Matthews, Eichel, Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, if we don't get those guys in the Olympics, like now, our next Olympics, then it is an incredible failure that I think will have ramifications that are long-term, and that not just that, USA should be competitive. Like that's the other thing, is we're also missing out on an opportunity for U.S. teams. Even going back to Sochi, if you put that U.S. team versus the Canadian team, there was a pretty significant gap. That gap has narrowed a lot in the last couple of years when you look at Charlie McAvoy and Adam Fox and all these other guys that have helped narrow the gap by winning awards, being team play, guys that win Stanley Cups and all these other things. This is the time to get those guys on the ice. And I think an American gold medal, all due respect to Canada, who will always want to win gold, but an American gold medal at this stage with those players would be a game changer for hockey for the rest of the time, for the United States. I would think we would see a rocket fuel situation. And I think they have the ability, they have the players, they have the goaltenders, they have, Vezina winners and Hart Trophy candidates, and all these players make it happen because, you're missing out on maybe one of the best opportunities to really enhance the game in the United States with a traumatic Olympic opportunity.
Or I let you go. I know you're a Midwest guy, and I know we shouldn't shop the whole Midwest in one region like we do New England. Not that close, but Minneapolis, St. Paul, I still consider that the hub of hockey, one of the greatest areas for hockey, announced that they will get the 2026 World Juniors. I can't imagine it going to a better city than that in the United States. I can't believe it's never gone there when I look at cities that have hosted in the United States. But what kind of a tournament do you expect in 2026 I would have to imagine the best hockey city for amateur athletics.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to see, there were like Seattle was in the mix, and I think, there had been talk of Tampa and Vegas being involved in the World Juniors, bidding and everything else. But back in 1982, Minneapolis, St. Paul did have it. But this is before anybody in the United States had any idea what junior hockey really was.
Right.
So it almost doesn't count that it was here. But now you bring it back, and it's interesting in Minnesota because Minnesota is not a junior hockey hotbed. You know what I mean? It's everything else but junior hockey. They do have the North American League. They have, more leagues, but traditionally it has been high school, college. And the thing is that the U.S. team is typically made up of college players. What I will say about you guys, we've all been there for Frozen Fours. We'll be there again. It is one of the best run events there is because they know how to do it. They do a fantastic job. You're going to have the main building be the Excel Center. You're going to have 3M Arena at Mariucci, however we want to say it, as the secondary venue. Proximity is going to allow people to see games in both venues. I think that's a great thing for the tournament. That's what we just had in Gothenburg, 20 minutes between venues. So it was great to get back and forth to different games. And really, the other thing that I'll point out is we just saw the PWHL had a game where they had 14,000 people in the Xcel Energy Center for a record crowd for professional women's hockey. And it's basically like every time you throw Minnesota a challenge to say, show us you are the state of hockey, they crush it. It's like, show us, and this tournament, I do feel like is going to be the next challenge because, you're close enough to the border. Obviously, I think we'll see a lot of people from Winnipeg pop down. We'll see people from Canada come over, which is often the concern is you want to have it near the Canadian border because that's the country that loves this so much. I think Minnesota fans are going to be able to show out and those USA games are going to be a lot more red, white, and blue than red and black that we saw in even in Sweden, where they had somewhere around 4,000 Canadian fans come out to Sweden. So I think Minneapolis, St. Paul, I agree. I can't believe it's taken us this long to get there, especially now that the Excel is there and with how much they've proven over time, how well they run events. I know from a logistics standpoint, it's outstanding for me. It'll be the first ever World Juniors I can drive to. So I'm pretty pumped about that, as weather permitting. And, I just think that this is going to be a really fun time. And I can't wait to see the build up too, because I think they're really going to do a good job with that. And I think we have an opportunity too, to make the World Juniors each year. I feel like it gets bigger. Some years, obviously it's going to have more attention because of the star power, this or that, but I'm really excited to see what the future holds. And I think that they're going to be great hosts. I do hope that one day, just once, just for 1 year, that we get a warm weather World Juniors. Because I just spent the last week.
You're ready for Tampa, aren't you?
Give me Tampa, give me Vegas. I'll take Arizona. I don't care. Just put it somewhere warm just once for me. Because I typically spend most of my year in the coldest portions of the country and in Canada. And Sweden was very chilly this year. So But I do have that thick Midwestern blood, as you mentioned, Midwestern guy. So I can handle the cold, but give me one warm weather someday, USA Hockey, just once.
Well, Chris Peters, as this tournament has grown, I also think that you and your exposure and what you do for this game has grown, and we appreciate it very much. I enjoyed following you from afar on Twitter or X, whatever the heck they want to call it these days. But we can't say enough about what you do for this game, and I know FloSports has to be so pleased with what they get in terms of your production. So thank you for your time today. You've been great in terms of giving us the whole lowdown on this tournament. We loved it from afar. We love it when we get to talk to you as well. So thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. It's seriously my pleasure. Very kind of you to say. And yeah, I just, I hope that we have a great rest of the college season. Can't wait to see. I mean, heck, Jimmy Snuggerud hopped off a plane. I can barely keep my eyes open. He had 6 points over the weekend, and he got off a transatlantic flight. I couldn't keep my eyes open in a car ride that was 2 hours long. So, if that's a sign of things to come for this college hockey season, I can't wait to see the rest of it. But thanks a lot for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Chris Peters from FloSports, probably, as you said, Jim, the preeminent international hockey writer around. You're talking about the development of the program and going into the Twin Cities in 2026 and how it's about time. But it's not been that long that people started paying attention to the World Juniors in the U.S. I remember riding on a team bus to broadcast a game probably a little over 20 years ago, maybe almost 25 years ago. And the Canadian players on the team are listening to the game on the radio and trying to keep up with it and all excited. And the American players and quite frankly, us American broadcasters really weren't tuned in on it. It's not that way anymore.
No, it certainly is not. And I mean, it's a schedule changer for me. I know that I was up every game. Thank God it was in Sweden and not, Eastern Russia. In terms of game times, there were some normal game times for this. 11 o'clock starts for most American games, and then 1:30 for the last two Eastern time. It was wonderful to be able to watch and enjoy it. This is a tournament that is so much fun to watch. Even when Chris went back to the Norway game. That was a very difficult game for the U.S. They did not storm out of the barn like everybody thought they would. They didn't pop 7 goals in the first period. I think they had 2, and then it was a 2-1 game. They ended up winning 4-1. Nobody, as he said, scored less than 6 goals on Norway the rest of the way. But the U.S. continued to improve. They saw that game as a win, and then they saw it as a building block. And I think that is the message that David Carl probably kept emphasizing in his locker room was get better every day. Keep finding a way. And that's what this team has done. And we've seen this now 5 times in 15 years. That is an unbelievable rate for the U.S., considering that 15 years ago, they had never won a gold medal in this tournament. Now they've done it 5 times in a span of basically 3 times that length. I think that is so great for the growth of this game, the growth of this tournament. And now to think that it is going to be on our home soil in the Twin Cities, in the state of hockey 2 years from now, I know that I will find a way to be on the ground for that. There's no way I'm going to miss that tournament. Phenomenal event. And I look forward to it because it really is. You don't have the Olympics every year. The World Championship, pardon my French, but it's bullshit. It doesn't matter because you're not playing with the NHL players because they're usually in the NHL playoffs. The IIHF intentionally, and I've talked to their president about this before, they intentionally schedule it so that the NHL players can't be there to make it more competitive for other countries. They don't want the US and Canada winning it all the time. So when you look at the tournaments that are available, the World Junior is the only tournament that is truly comprised of the best players. And yes, I know Connor Bedard didn't go this year for Canada. He was under NHL contract. But you know what? Poitras from Matt Poitras from Boston did. So you still get some NHL players in there, but the reality is this is the best. This is the future for hockey for a lot of countries, and this is a great event. I love it. It's so much fun to watch, and we see why when the U.S. wins. It's so much. There's just so much enjoyment for the hockey base that follows this tournament. I want more people to follow it.
Yeah, I agree. And right now, we talked about what's next for David Carl. I'm going to wrap things up by nominating him to be the Olympic coach for Team USA next time around.
It's a big nomination, but I wouldn't mind seeing it.
This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight.